Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Nadi Laylek. I'm the communication advisor at the RRD, but what is RRD? It stands for French National Research Institute for Development. I'm based in Nouméa, in New Caledonia, and I'm today with Max Ball, the head of the Cooperation Service of the RFI, which stands for Radio France Internationale, and he's coming from much more a longer way than mine, because he's from Paris, he's based in Paris. And we're really happy to have this wonderful and amazing opportunity to be here at the ABU Summit. Thanks a lot for the organizer to have invited us, and to introduce you to the EPOP project. But first of all, I would like to invite our two official guests to come and say the opening speeches. Mr. Soutiro Sim, Ambassador of France in Fiji.
Bula. My name is Soutiro Sim, and I serve as the Ambassador of France to Fiji. And I will tell you a secret. Wherever I appear, suddenly a miracle happens. Everybody speaks French. So let me see. Bonjour. So you see, this is a miracle. This afternoon I have the privilege to open this EPOP showcase. And as I was given only 3 minutes to do so, I will simply share with you the 3 reasons why France supports this wonderful program initiated by 2 French operators, IRD and RFI. There are 3 reasons, and the first one is that EPOP focuses on climate change, and France is a champion for climate change. The agreement on climate change will forever be known as the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and it is not only a thing of the past, because our current president, President Macron, decided to make a very strong commitment to climate change at a time when some of the parties decided to withdraw. So 2 months ago, he commemorated the 2nd anniversary of the Paris Agreement, hosting in Paris a major summit, the One Planet Summit, with the participation of the Prime Minister of Fiji as the president of COP23. And his ambition is no less but to make our planet great again. The second reason why France supports the EPOP program is because it is relying on the youth, and France believes in future generations. Of course, we have a very young president, but that's not the only reason. The EPOP program relies on young observers, and they have a key role to play to raise awareness, to foster education, to build a link between generations, to preserve the immaterial heritage of humanity, and to commit to the future of the planet. The last reason why we support the EPOP program is that it is centered on the Pacific, and France is a nation of the Pacific through its territories of French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and Wallis and Futuna. So we all know that the Pacific is one of the most vulnerable areas on the planet to climate change, and the challenges of ocean warming and acidification, sea level rise, invasion of salt water on arable lands, destruction of coral reefs, the increase in the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. Those are the challenges of the Pacific, and those are our challenges for France as well. So I would invite you, and you will have a very nice presentation this afternoon, but to really support this program as much as you can, and if possible, to replicate it to other areas of the world. 2 things to conclude. The first one is to invite you to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, on my official accounts and on the accounts of the embassy. And the second one is just to check if my miracle is still here, if you still speak French. Merci. Okay, I still have my miracle. So this is the end of my French-speaking session. You can now turn back to the language of your choice, and I hand it back to the Fijian officials. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mrs. Tupau Tua Paravilala, Principal Legal Officer of the AG Chambers.
Thank you, Mina. The Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, Dr. Javed Motagi, His Excellency Sujiro Sim, Ambassador of France in the Republic of Fiji, Kiribati, Nauru, Tonga, and Tuvalu, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka, and good afternoon. On behalf of the Government of the Republic of Fiji, it is indeed an honor and my pleasure to jointly open this session. One thing is clear about climate change. It does not discriminate. It does not recognize gender, age, or national borders. It is a phenomenon that faces us all. As our Honorable Prime Minister Voreqe Bainimarama has said numerous times, and the SG had also mentioned this earlier, that we are all in the same canoe, or drua, together. This is made clearer through projects like EPOP, which provides a platform for young people anywhere and everywhere to harness modern technology in the fight against climate change. The project's cross-generational approach is also a further reminder that we are all brought together, united in this fight or in this cause. Now, by using modern tools of technology to capture and preserve, we will ensure that the stories, experiences, and lessons of the older generations will not be forgotten. And by recording stories of our neighbors, stories of our elders in our communities, our parents, our grandparents, we will be able to share it with a global audience. Now, with those few words, I look forward to fruitful discussions in this session with the goal of working together effectively as people, as organizations, stakeholders, and as nations. Vinaka Vakalevo, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tupau. So EPOP is a platform where the youth act as observers and journalists, and EPOP is also a project that would not be possible without the science community or the regional organization support and aid. And to answer your questions, we have with us the privilege to welcome François Martel, Secretary General of the Pacific Island Development Forum, Herman Timmermans, Project Manager at SPREP, the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environmental Program, Sylvie Goyer, Director of SPC, Pacific Community, especially in the Division of Climate Change and Environmental Sustainability, and Phantom Lutuna Tabua, Pacific Regional Coordinator of 350.org. And they followed us from all over the planet, starting with a USB workshop here last year, and they flew with us at the COP23 in Bonn in Germany. We have two of our EPOPers with us, and I let them introduce themselves as real journalists.
Hello, my name is Telsa Jimmy, and I am from Vanuatu. I am a student journalist at University of the South Pacific, based here at Laudala campus. It's an honor to be here to represent EPOP this afternoon. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Corey Tandolala. I'm a student journalist at the University of the South Pacific at Laudala, and we're both in our final year of college. So it's really nice to be here. Thank you.
So I give the mic to Max because he is going to explain what is EPOP exactly.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Max Bale. I do drive RFI Planet Radio, which is the International Cooperation Department of France Media Monde. I'm French, and as many French people, I don't speak English very well. So please excuse me for that. I do my best. Planet Radio is an organization, a 20 years old organization working close to the very rural population around the world. We used to work mainly in Africa with pygmies in Amazonia, where people are in front of a lack of communication, because many times, for any kind of problematic, we often forget to ask and to listen to them. Because there's so many things to say, they got so many skills, and we do think that we never use it enough. That's the reason why we try to create around the world different kind of tools like community radios and community members and centers and hip-hop project for giving the chance to the population to recreate a link with scientists, economical and political world, which are so far from them. And today we're going to talk about climate change. And you know, climate change is, for many people around the world, are only a couple of words. Doesn't mean quite concrete things. They heard about that. They can see differences in climate change, in the climate, but they cannot say why like that, what will they do, and what will they be in front of in the near future. So Planet Radio, as I told you, is a project created by France Média Monde. Just a couple of words about France Média Monde. It's a French consortium, including France 24, which is a French TV channel, broadcasting in 4 languages around the world. Then Radio France International, which is an international radio broadcasting in 22 or 23 international languages around the world too. And we do have 222 million home reached worldwide. So it's so much, and I'm very proud that my president accepted to include hip-hop in the FMM project. And I can tell you that it wasn't quite easy at the beginning. For giving voice to the local population, it's not a reflex for the broadcaster. Okay, I do create that project, and we develop now hip-hop with IRD, and I will give the mic to Mina to explain a bit more what is this French National Research Institute for Sustainable Development.
Yes, so the IRD is a public French state institute, and we report to the Ministry of European Affairs and Foreign Affairs. That's for one of our head. The other one is the Ministry of Research and Higher Education. So our main missions are research, of course, but also training, capacity building, especially in science, and innovation, because our research mainly focuses on developing applied outcome and results to help the developing countries reach their sustainable development. So the activities we have are split in 3 categories: environment and resource, societies, and health. Our credo, because we do have this credo in our mind and in our heart, it's science engaged to sustainable development. Here you have a map on all the IRD centers in the world. So it represents around 2,000 IRD staff, among which 100 are researchers. And we have an annual budget of 230 million euros, and in the Pacific region, the Nouméa Center has 200 agents.
Okay, thank you very much, Mina. Now, the question is, what is hip-hop? We know hip-hop, but no more about hip-hop. There's a big difference. I come from musical stuff, so my last job was a musical producer, so I'm stick to the both sides of hip-hop, the hip and the hip. Hip-hop is a participatory observer project. What does it mean? What does it mean? It means that we do think that with that kind of international and intergenerational concept, we now can combine media and science. Why? And mainly by making a focus on a network, social media. Why? Because after traveling around the world since 20 years in a very far countries and very far part and very far region, Each time I can see people asking me basic question about the biggest problematic, which is climate change. They ask me about, are we the cause of it? Where it's from? I mean, why is our part now is too much windy, or too much rain, or what about the size of fish? What about the difference of temperature? So what happened? We don't know about that. And on the other side, we show that on the scientists, in the scientist community, they don't have any possibility to be fed by the monitoring coming from the rural population, the last chain part. For many reasons, it's very complicated to get it. It costs a lot to go on the field, to talk to them. If you ask to the broadcaster who are there, I'm sure that if you have to do a report on Fiji, you will not stay 3 months for doing that. You will go to a couple of places and you'll have to do a resume for what's happening around. By using hip-hop networks, this international youth network, we're going to ask to the youth to recreate a link with the elder. Why? Because the elder have seen the changes, which is not the case for the young, because they were born in that situation. And the elder have so many things to say, and they don't know to who to talk. We made a huge press conference in Nouméa 3 months ago, and the journalists asked the hip-hoppers, what did you get from that experience? And the first thing they answered, I was very surprised. It wasn't the case. It wasn't by saying, okay, it was a good experience to learn, to get some skills, blah, blah. They were very surprised by the fact that the elder generation were waiting for them. And all the old people who were interviewed through the hip-hop capsule were saying, we were waiting for you. We don't know to who to talk. We don't know to who to ask questions about that. We've got many skills, many use, we've got things to say. Thank you for coming. And the hip-hoppers, you maybe can ask that, to Telstar and Korai. That's the reality. There's a big lake of communication between both generations. Maybe it's called the beginning of a new century, digital century, and the link is quite weak, actually. So this lake of human component also is very important, because each time when you travel around the world, you only can talk with scientists, economical, political words. They use figures, percentage, curves, percentage of particle, blah, blah. And if you go on the field, and you'll see that in the capsule, 90% or 99% of the population don't know a word about that. I mean, they seem that they are not quite involved. You would like to be more involved in the discussion for creating the next agreement, the next law, that kind of thing. And it's a pity. We do think that it's a pity, because we've got so much to learn from them. So by mixing the old and the new generation, we'll work on something which is quite important for me, that I call climate memory. We never talk about that, climate memory. If you want to prepare the future for any kind of problematic, you have to be fed by the past. It's easier. I mean, it's just evident. I mean, you can say, okay, I hope that we'll not make the same mistakes in the future. So let's be fed. Let's get the skills from the past, and we'll prepare all together what will happen in the future. And this is one of the most important goals for the hip-hop project. But now how we do that? With that very basic thing, I'm sure that more than 100% of the people who are here got in the pocket. It's cheap. It's very easy to use. And I can tell you, I use it with pygmies in Africa. There's no network, but they got a smartphone. They make pictures, they change pictures, they make a selfie. In the very, very deep forest, I've seen pygmies naked with a smartphone. Just for saying that this is a tool that we don't use enough. And if you want to get the reality from the field, we must ask the youth, and they're ready for that. Telstar and Cora will tell you, but they're ready for that. They're ready to interview the elder, and not any type of elder, their relatives. Why? Because I'm a journalist, and I can tell you, each time if I interview one of you, 50% of what you say to me will be wrong things, because you don't know me, and you don't want to say very intimate things. You'll say, yeah, very general things, But if I ask a question to my grandfather will never lie to me. This is something very important for recreating that link between generations, to use the relatives, to use the family spirit. And all the reports we've made with the hip-hoppers are made between their grandfathers and their grand-uncle or sister or whatever, but for recreating that kind of link and by getting something really emotional, something true. Because in the family, it's not easy to lie. And you know that as well as me. So we use that one, as I told you, for making 2 or 3 minutes clips. Why? It's very short. I'm very agree, it's very short. But the youth don't have so much time now to spend on it. If it's not interesting, they will skip, and they will go in another for watching a TV serial or whatever. So why did I decide to make 2 minutes? Because, to be honest with you, it's a duration between 2 bus stations or tube stations in Europe. So in 2 minutes, if you're not interesting enough in 2 minutes, it means that your project is bad. Because they live with it, they sleep with it, and they're more close to their smartphone than their girlfriend or boyfriend. So if you want to be close to them, you have to propose something with a format close to the one they used to look. So I'm sorry, I do speak too much because I'm totally involved in that kind of project. To go ahead, I'd like to show you a report which has been made after the COP23 in Bonn. We've been officially invited by the Fijian Pavilion for presenting hip-hop. We were very proud of it. I'd like to say thanks to the Fijian government for that. And we present that project to different partners. And let me refine it. And the France 24 channel made a program for presenting what is hip-hop. This program in English has been broadcasted around the world, so everybody knows hip-hop, I hope now. And let me show you, and after that, I'll give the mic to Mina for going ahead. Sorry, I do as fastly as possible.
A special report now from our observers/e-poppers, Koroi and Telstar. We first met them in Fiji, where they were learning to use their smartphones to document climate change. The idea behind e-pop is for young people in the South Pacific to interview their elders about their experiences, to provide a human element that is often lacking in scientific research and international policy papers. Well, this week, Koroi and Telstar took their videos to Germany for the UN's big annual climate conference, COP23.
We are e-poppers and an observer, and we're here at COP23 because we feel the need to address the issue of climate change that we're facing in our Pacific region.
The thing about bringing e-pop to COP23 is that it can enable it to be able to build partnerships with other projects.
And in that way, we actually fasten and quicken the spreading of the words of climate change around the globe and around regions. We're here at the Fiji Pavilion, as you can see behind us.
And this is where we're going to be asking some questions to representatives from some organizations around the region and around the world. We have questions, so many questions, and yet only you have the answer and the solution.
The village headman told us that there aren't enough fish to catch nowadays. What can be done to replace sources of their livelihood and their sources of income that are being drastically declining and slowly being eradicated by climate change?
There's been so many moving images, there's been inspiring talks, but I guess it really comes down to what the powerful decision makers will really come up with so that we can really reverse the effects of climate change on our people, especially us in the Pacific.
If you want to see more of the e-poppers' work, take a look at their site, epop.network.
Before giving back the mic to Mina, I just like a word. Let me make you confident. When I create that project, and when I've been to our president's office for presenting it before starting, because as usual, you cannot start a project by knocking your hands. I said, there's an urgency. We have to go to the Pacific. And you know what do they answer to me? Why to go to the Pacific, Max? It's far. Go to Africa. Go to South of America. Pacific is far. You know that in Europe, we don't talk so much about Pacific region. That's a reality. I had to precise, this country is there, this country is there. Nobody knows about that. And until now, I'm fighting daily for explaining that we have to work in the Pacific region, because it's very urgent. So you will be, unfortunately, the first victims. You know that. So I have to fight for explaining that to all the broadcasters around in Europe, mainly in America too. And I can tell you that when we'll start in the next months, the hip-hop project in Africa, it will be easy. But in Pacific, I fight daily for finding funds, for finding partners, because it's complicated. I'm not talking about the local partner, but in Europe. I don't know if I can say that, but nobody cares what's happening in Pacific in Europe. We have to talk, we have to explain, we have to show what's happening around. Because in the news, the TV news, we don't talk so much about, except when there are hurricane or cyclone, something like that. But what was the daily life? What about the daily life for the population? We don't talk enough about that. That's why I would like to insist on that region. Thank you very much. I'll let the mic to Mena. Thank you.
So Telstar and Karoy, the floor is yours.
Kabichingo na kampani nungu wali lotu na bukanda na wali lotu ni lotu esile rabuta katara ngana zai sember kena ngala ba ilim sanga ur kali mana wale chiko mena ngana wati kena ngala ba Winston lima bina tala ngana wale bo do hala wisa ko redra kona dini matingo bata kena uwa iliu non go sabi sa okay sa vita trap chunga mena nya dahuli leo dile ta ni machi ko tala meni zakau sa pakai la ndrama sa sianga kina naika rona bisu lebo ya ore deni ko semana dengo me bisu tak sarmo na bisu ni bonua laksa tau sarmo chuna ndak bisau nunguna numa ndur misawa pila kita nga ani mami bulo ki mami chu mami ken sa lingo ba pila ta kini mami bulo ki man ebu inda ki bisongo ni bina kani ni mami lotu bina kana ni mami vio kani bat ke na nona pala kongo ni daki ngi bina ki na nona ni bisongo ni bir
So that clip is from Nambukandra in Tailevu. It's a Fijian village, somewhere close to Nosori. It's one of the many villages in Fiji and in the Pacific region that's been affected by climate change. Now, the reason why I went to the village is because there's lack of communication in many Fijian communities, and they're suffering from climate change, but the main problem is that they don't know what climate change is. So we went to them to ask questions and try to get that human emotion and for them to tell their story. Sorry.
Yeah, it's for you.
So, and they talked about one of the main thing, intensity of cyclones over the years has been increasing year after year, and one of the major cyclones that affected Fiji, and I believe you all know it's Winston. Now, God forbid another cyclone equivalent to Winston hit Fiji, because many Fijian communities are still recovering from that Winston. Now my question is to Francois Mattel from PIDF. Now, are cyclones affecting the Pacific communities linked to climate change? Are cyclones affecting the Pacific communities linked to climate change?
Look, I think the scientific evidence is now quite clear. And the projections by the IPCC reports and the ones that will be coming forward very shortly on the 1.5 degrees Celsius is clearly indicating that although the frequency of the cyclones might be reduced, actually they will be more intense. So we are really truly entering into this cyclone category 5 era. And we've seen it, all the last recent cyclones in the Pacific have been Cyclone 5, Pam, and Winston in particular. So this is, these are with damaging effects. So there's no real doubt that increased intensity is linked with warmer waters. And if I recall, both for Pam and both for Winston, the average temperature of the ocean waters on the surface was around 30 degrees Celsius. And I think the same applied also for the Caribbeans. So I think you can make certainly a direct link between the cyclones and climate change, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Two questions.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe just to mention that I think it's NOAA, which is the American Meteorological Organization. I read an article that they're considering introducing a new category for cyclones because the current categories are 5. The category 5 is not adequate to cope with the extremely strong winds that we're now experiencing with some of these category 5 super cyclones. So they're now looking at introducing a category 6 possibly. So this is an indication that cyclones are getting more intense, unfortunately.
Thank you, Hem, for the precision. Now let's have a look now for a video, or hip-hop clip made by Telstar.
Lavinia Magoon is a widow with 17 grandchildren, living on her husband's land in Tonguru, Fiji. Due to rising sea levels, the government has asked her to relocate her family and her home, a place she has lived in for almost 50 decades.
I saw them talking on the TV, and they brought Tonguru up about the climate change and doing the relocations of people. And they mentioned that we will be relocated. When I came here, this was just all wild trees. The trees were growing all, there were 4 trees right around the place. Because of this climate change or whatever you call it, when we have a storm or strong winds, hurricanes, all our trees are all falling away. When I came here, we used to walk around the grave. There was all bushes and things. Almost about 50 or more than 50 meters of land been washed away. We'd love just to stay close by the sea and see what happens. I feel at home. I am happy here. Get your family here, your family ties here.
Okay, this topic on coastal erosion and sea level rise is one that is very close to my heart because my own families back home in Vanuatu have been asked to relocate also because of rising sea levels. And just like Lavinia Magoon, our graves are slowly being encroached upon by rising sea levels. So when I heard about this story, I decided to follow up on this lady and got her side, her voice out to the people. My question this afternoon, firstly, is to Mr. Fenton from 350.org. How does 350.org call attention to the sea level rise in our vulnerable Pacific communities?
Thank you very much, Telsa. I guess before I respond to your question, I think I want to congratulate the EPOP team. I think the work that you're all doing is important for many reasons, but especially because it centers young people and storytelling in the project, and I think that's super important. And I think as well, I want to preface a little bit where I'm coming from. So I have a background in communications. I came through the University of the South Pacific with the journalism program. They're chill with, and I've dabbled a little bit in sort of print media, a bit of television, and a bit of radio. And I work in spaces that primarily organizes with a lot of frontline communities to really step up and take action on climate change. And so with the issue of sea level rise, I think what I do as a Pacific Regional Coordinator is I work alongside a group of young people that identify themselves as the Pacific Climate Warriors. And that identity and that name came from a willingness to challenge the existing narrative that existed about Pacific Islanders and this international climate discourse. One that painted Pacific Islanders as mere victims of climate change and neglected the many nuances of what makes a Pacific Islander, one of which is our innovativeness, our ability to organize together as a community, especially because of a lot of the traditional structures in which we are brought up in. And so in that quest to challenge that narrative, to switch it from we're just mere victims of climate change to warriors of the Pacific, that's how these young people came about that identity of Pacific climate warriors who rally behind a mantra, we're not drowning, we're fighting. And a way in which we address the issues of sea level rise and climate change really is by identifying the many important ways in which we could, as young Pacific Islanders, leverage the power of social media to shape our own stories coming out of our region. Because it really became an important conversation about not only whose stories are being told, but whose voices are shaping those stories. And so when it comes to if you think about the nexus of sort of digital storytelling and the array of digital tools that are available at our fingertips now, like Max was saying, I think that's sort of one way we try and shape the narrative that says, although we are living with sea level rise and that's a part of our realities right now, there's also so many different parts of the story. There's so many communities that are coming together to, who live in a perpetual state of rehabilitation, but need to continuously build that seawall. I know of communities in Tokelau and Samoa that are very innovative when it comes to thinking about mitigation on the front lines of climate change and adaptation, especially with keyhole gardens that are championed in Tokelau by Mikaele Maiava, as well as in Samoa. And so, and I think something else that I really just want to mention as well is to just touch on something Ms. Baravilala had mentioned earlier that I think is very important. The ability to tell our stories is a way in which we not only bridge the knowledge gap from our ancestors to young people now, but is a way in which we can record our history, right? So in 10, 20 years now, the stories that come out of our region will be shaped by a lot of young people. And so it's projects like EPOP, what the World Bank and Tom Perry did in Vanuatu, as well as the Pacific Climate Warriors around the region that really reflect our diverse truths as Pacific Islanders, I think is important.
Thank you. My next question is to Ms. Sylvie from SPC. Given the probability that there will be more environmental migrations, how is this addressed in the international level, and does SPC have such programs that help cope with these negotiations?
Thank you. Just a word here, I'm from SPC, which is the Pacific Community. It's a regional intergovernmental organization based in the South Pacific. The headquarters are in Noumea. And we are a scientific and technical organization. So we've been assisting our member countries, Pacific Island countries and territories in development issues over the past 70 years now. We just celebrated our 70 years. Let me say that there's been migration in this region. It has happened for a long time, but indeed, recently we've been observing a number of climate-induced internal migration. You all know about Cartelet in PNG, forgive my accent, in PNG, or Tukuraki in Fiji. There's a few instances like this. So it is happening, and it's probably going to happen even more. We've got hold of a recent study by UNESCAP, UNDP, and others, alluding that for some of these countries like Kiribati and Tuvalu, over 70% of households believe that they're going to have to move. So it is indeed, it's becoming a reality. Let me also say that migration is not easy. You've heard it in the video and eloquently from my colleague here. It's not only a material, an infrastructure type of issue. It has a lot of emotion attached to it, a lot of non-tangible issues, a lot of identity issues are involved, land ownership, and etc. And it was very well displayed here in this video. So a migration is never easy. It's a very complex process, and it has to be done very meticulously, looking at all of these issues with the community, of course, involved. Yes, at SBC, we've had a program on disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management for many, many years now. And what we do accompany governments who feel that they want to go with that option as the last resort. Let me say that most of the Pacific, all of the Pacific Island countries would tell you this is the last resort for their communities. It's not like it's part of these solutions. It is a last resort. Kiribati, president, used to say migrating with dignity. So there's a lot of issues around this. So what we do at SPC, we do accompany governments when they decide to take the step and move a village, a community, a household. We do work mostly, though, on disaster risk prevention. What kind of actions can be undertaken to mitigate this kind of thing, to mitigate coastal erosion? There are things that we can do, in particular, working on ecosystem-based protection. So what can we do to prevent it? So we do quite a bit of work on disaster risk reduction. But then, of course, when the decision is made to move a village or a community, we work with the government on the planning of it. As I said, it's a complex issue. It has to be done very meticulously. So we work with the government on the planning of the migration. It's often an internal migration. We're not talking about migrating to the US, our friends. And we're usually talking about migrating in a similar environment, in a similar country. So there's a range of actions that we would be doing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And my last question is to Mr. Herman from SPREP. Coastal erosion is the herald of sea level rise, and mangrove restoration is promoted as an ideal resolution to this problem. What is the status of mangroves in Fiji and elsewhere in the Pacific?
Thank you very much. Just to start off to say, I'm from the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program. And like Pacific Community that Sylvie represents, we're also an intergovernmental technical organization, whereas Pacific Community has quite a broad development mandate, a number of sectors. They work in a number of sectors across the development field. We specifically work in environmental management, and our role is to support the governments in the region in terms of the technical capacity building and advice regarding environmental management. That's what we do. SPREP is our acronym, and we're based in Apia in Samoa. So coming to your question about mangroves and the status of mangroves, well, we understand that mangroves are really important ecosystems. in the sense that they occur at the interface between the marine environment and the terrestrial environment. I think many of us know that they're highly productive ecosystems. We can almost think of them as food baskets because of the amount of productivity that takes place there with regard to food production, feeding, providing nursery areas and food for our fisheries, as well as a number of other commodities and natural resources that people make use of, including mud crab and so forth, food resources, but also timber resources. So mangroves are of great importance to people and communities, but more recently we're starting to realize that mangroves have a role to play in mitigating and reducing the risks relating to climate change. So they're coming to the spotlight again for this reason. And in a sense, if all the islands in the Pacific if all the coastlines were surrounded by mangroves, had mangroves growing there, that would be a great thing, because mangroves are a great deterrent to coastal erosion. So they could really help with sea level rise. But that isn't the case because mangroves don't grow everywhere. They're quite specific in terms of the environment that they can grow in. So across the Pacific, you find mangroves more in the Western Pacific Island countries, the Melanesian countries. So the biggest concentration of mangroves are found in Papua New Guinea, by far the biggest. I think they have something like 372,000 hectares of mangroves in Papua New Guinea, out of a total in the region of roughly 524,000 hectares. So the majority is found in Papua New Guinea. Solomon Islands is second with 64,000 hectares. Fiji, nobody is quite sure exactly what the cover of mangroves is, but it's between 33 and 52,000 hectares, somewhere around there. Vanuatu, Tonga, Samoa all have mangroves, but smaller amounts. And the Northern Pacific Islands of Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, of course, have a lot of mangroves, but they're pretty small countries in their own right, so the extent of mangroves is big in relation to their countries, but is relatively small in total size. The reason for this, I think, is the islands in the Melanesian countries, the Western Pacific, are higher islands and maybe older, so you have more developed river systems, and mangroves require the sediments from these big river systems to grow. As you know, mangroves are normally found in the river deltas of these systems. The islands to the east in the Pacific are more, some of them are high islands that do have some mangroves, but not as many, and a lot of them are more atoll islands where you don't find the mangroves occurring in the same numbers. Also, maybe just to point out that the mangroves in the Pacific represent about 4% of the mangrove cover worldwide, but that our species diversity is really high in the Pacific. And in some countries, such as in Papua New Guinea, 43 different species of mangroves, which is phenomenal. Solomon Islands, 29, Vanuatu, 23, and so on. So really rich diversity of species in the Pacific. But unfortunately, mangroves, those that we have, are under a lot of pressure from a number of threats, and a lot of those. Climate change is one particular threat that is likely to impact on mangroves, particularly with sea level rise. The prediction there that's contained in the IPCC report is that we are likely to see a reduction of 13% of the current mangrove cover by the year 2100, which is a reduction of about 0.15% per annum as a result of sea level rise only. But more significantly, I think, are the current pressures that mangroves are facing through development pressures. Countries in the Pacific Islands are developing countries. There's a lot of emphasis on commercial activity, stimulating development, and a lot of this has to take place in the coastal areas because this is where the flat land is located. So through conversion for commercial purposes and for agriculture, there's some figures that I'd like to quote, but don't quote me, because I think I should also point out that mangroves have been, to to a certain extent, undervalued in the past, both in terms of governance, but also in terms of the research that's taken place. So there isn't, in the Pacific Island region, so there isn't that much good information that is available. But for example, Solomon Islands, some research has shown that between 1990 and 2010, the mangroves were decreasing at a rate of 1.5% per annum. That might not sound like a lot, but that actually means that if that rate continues, they would disappear in less than 100 years. Fiji, 0.5% per annum. That would give them a timeline of 200 years. And these rates do not take into account the added impact of climate change, which is likely to impact on our mangroves in a similar way. Thank you.
Bai mode ni lau isuwa betawa na tokai chiku ini tinga diwa ono sanga bulu dia sanga bulu tinga diwa dia sanga bulu dia sanga bulu sasianga sara plastik tangan ini ubah itu kalau dulu kalau lain berana tangan bulu saya kato bawabich jadi kuah tak plastik wala kita lang ni sakit lang na sto sakit ko to ul so sa ta kami ko lo ya taro nga siya tawa mana siya tawa na plastika siya tawa tapos suji patata na ika si jaro ko to na kadiba itu di kaya naran itu guna itu ya gitu mau talaga itu ya ran maru gitu gawa gitu maru ya.
Now, Mr. Semisi Dhama is a resident. He's from Laos, and I'm also from Laos. He lives close to USP where we're studying, and he talks about water excess and plastic pollutions. And he's right about one thing, that plastic is everywhere, and we're trying our best to curb that. Now, my first question is to Mr. Herman Timmermans. We are aware of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch that stretches for more than twice the size of Texas. In this report, we can see the lack of a proper waste management practices. What are the situations in other Pacific Island countries?
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned the Pacific garbage trash, or the Jaya, which is also, we've also spoken about plastic soup. I think a lot of that is found in that particular region, the Northern Pacific, in that vortex. What we mean by plastic soup, it's plastic breaks down, the plastic that's floating in the ocean, through the exposure to the sunlight and the wave energy, and eventually it breaks down to its smallest constituent component, which are very small plastic nodules, which are called microplastics. And these are not biodegradable. These remain in the system, in the marine system, and they mix with the seawater, turning it a turbid color, making it look like soup. So I think that's what's referred to there. And in this particular Pacific trash vortex, as they call it, apparently there's 6 kilograms of plastic for every 1 kilogram of plankton. So marine life that is trying to feed on plankton in that area, it's feeding on a lot of plastic at the same time. So this is something that's the profile of which is being raised recently through some seminal studies on microplastics, and there's there's growing concern internationally about what this means for our oceans and what this means for the food chains. Not only the health of the ecology of the oceans, but also of the services that we receive in terms of from these ecosystems, such as the fisheries and fish and seafood that we eat. Some accounts, I don't think this is possible really to work out, but it's a good line. Some people are saying that by 2050 there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish. We know that there was a big United Nations conference on the oceans last year, which I think was the first major UN conference to focus on this problem about pollution in the oceans. And this has started to galvanize political support across the globe to try and address plastic pollution, with the Fiji government playing a leading role in that conference. There's been a good response from Pacific Island countries in the region with regard to trying to tackle the issue of plastic pollution. So Vanuatu is the latest country that's introducing a plastic bag ban coming into effect on July 1st, as well as a ban on takeaway containers, polystyrene takeaway containers, and single-use straws. But they're by no means the first. I think the first country in the region was American Samoa, to ban plastic bags in 2010. They have biodegradable bags in place of plastic bags. And 2005, Samoa followed suit. 2014, Yap in Federated States of Micronesia. And 2017, Commonwealth and Mariana Islands, Republic of Marshall Islands, Palau. So a number of countries have already introduced these plastic bag bans. And Solomon Islands is in the process of introducing similar legislation. Another way of reducing the plastic pollution is introducing a levy onto plastic and other forms of waste. Fiji went that route. As you know, Fiji has introduced a 10-cent levy on plastic bags. Other countries are going the levy route are Kiribati, Palau, Kozrai in FSM, Yap in FSM, New Caledonia, and Tahiti. And many of these are introducing what they call container levies, so that you pay a little bit extra for the container that your product comes in, and when you bring the container back to the supermarket or to the shop that you bought it from, you get your deposit back, much like the beer bottles that we're familiar with in Fiji, where that is already happening. That's being introduced across the region as well, and it's also being introduced for things like car batteries. In New Caledonia, they have a levy for used oil and for e-waste as well. So I'll just finish off by saying that in the region we have a regional strategy to try and tackle this issue, and it's called the Pacific Regional Waste and Pollution Management Strategy, 2016 to 2025. For short, it's referred to as the Kina Pacific 2025, and this is really the regional instrument that we're trying to get countries to rally behind and to implement, because a lot of the actions to address this issue are contained within that regional strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this plastic pollution impacts the ocean and also rivers. So it also has an impact on water that we have access to, water that we drink. So it does poses a threat. And that is also comes second to the threat that has been posed by climate change in case of long periods of drought, for example. Now, my question is to Mr. François Martel from PIDF again. Do you think reduced water resources can lead to conflicts? I'm sorry. Do you think reduced water resources can lead to conflicts?
Thank you, Koroi, for these questions. It's quite certain that it leads to conflict. In fact, over the last many years, we've seen some interesting development internationally, where the lack of water and droughts have actually caused conflict. In effect, it's now quite well proven that in the case of Syria, one of the key triggers for the situation in Syria and the crisis that has come later in terms of refugees throughout Europe was caused by an extensive drought. We starting to see this phenomenon also in the Pacific. We've seen the Marshall Islands struggling with intensive droughts, and it is quite likely that it will increase the potential for displacement internally within many of the Pacific Islands that have a very small water resources. So it is likely to conflict. If I can recall my experience in Tuvalu, in Funafuti, where I first worked at the time at SPREP on a conservation project to establish a marine conservation area. The key issue raised by the communities on Funafuti was the fact that these resources belong to the people of Funafuti, but half of the populations of Funafuti is actually from islands from the rest of the archipelago, from another 7 of their islands. And the sharing of these resources was a key issue for them. So the protection requested by the government of Funafuti, or the Island Council of Funafuti, was to ensure that these resources were not going to be shared, or the landowners would be the first one to actually benefit from them. The same applies for water, and I think it's even more so, and it will require for us to actually understand the areas where there is more likely to be droughts. We see also a resurgence of, when I mean a resurgence, there is a high level of land degradation across the higher mountains in particular. And we don't necessarily value here in the Pacific ecosystem services, such as water in particular. And we've talked a lot about payments for ecosystem services, but I am yet to encounter in the Pacific countries or districts or provinces that have actually implemented payment for ecosystem services, such like water, and ensuring watershed protection. And I think, so you combine droughts with land degradation, and in both cases, yes, there is quite likely to be some conflict. We haven't seen major conflicts in the Pacific, but if we even look at the more recent conflicts in the Middle East, in Africa, between Egypt and Ethiopia over the use of water, the creation of a water dam that will, on the Nile, that will actually deprive Egyptian farmers from the water, the irrigation water they require, will have quite an impact. So it could actually, between two nations, create quite a conflict.
Thank you very much. Now my final question is to Sylvie Goyet. As we are all aware, there are many countries in the Pacific are going through dry spells with very little rainfall. Now, how is SPC helping when it comes to water resource management?
Thanks. Let me say from the start that in the Pacific, only about 50% of the population have access to improved drinking water, and maybe just less than a third to improved sanitation facilities. So, you know, the baseline is already stressed. So any further impacts that climate change would compound, whether in terms of increased phenomenon of drought, floods, or that kind of things, puts an additional stress on a system that's already not optimum. So how we deal about this, we have indeed a water and sanitation program at SPC within the GEM division. We work both on the infrastructure itself, making sure in particular that all these issues about leaks and inefficiency in the water system is addressed, because the issue is not to get more water, is already to maintain what we have. So a lot of work on that, on you know, working on the maintenance, on the planning, on the monitoring. A lot of work as well to reduce the water wastage in some areas, and it could cut across many sectors. It could be in the agricultural sector with wastage of water in poor irrigation practices, or in sanitation, we're promoting, you know, toilet and composting in toilet instead of water. So there's various ways to go about reducing water wastage. In terms of safe drinking water as well, we've been introducing things like solar disinfection, and that works particularly well in countries like Tuvalu or Kiribati. The issue is not to have only access to drinking water, but to have access to safe drinking water. So we found that solar disinfection has worked well at community level. And this is being promoted through some of the project. We're also looking at maximizing the water yields we could get. In some countries like Marshall Islands, we've been bringing in water tanks and facilities to catch rainfall waters more effectively. And finally, our smart engineering are keen at looking at new innovative geoscience water resources, looking at how to capture some of the aquifers or some of the less touched water lenses. So we're looking at various things. What I'd like to say is that it has to be an integrated approach, and we've done that, for example, in Kiribati Island in Kiribati, looking at the whole thing, looking at the maintenance of the system, the planning, reducing the water wastage, enhancing the safe access to drinking water, that kind of thing. So within an integrated planning approach, but of course it's led by the government and it's led by, government services, and we support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope I could get an interview with you for my Fiji story this year.
Burai, pote, pote neño en Blaise. Moi, avant 1942. Peut-être dans le temps, les champs ont changé, les temps ont changé. Il y avait les crevettes, il y avait les anguilles, toutes sortes de... Mais maintenant, il n'y a presque plus. On dit que c'est la sécheresse, quoi. L'anguille, c'est la première, quand il y a les coutumes et tout ça. C'est l'anguille qui va en premier. La coutume, c'est un devoir de tous les vieux depuis longtemps. Et quand tout cela disparaît, ça veut dire que la coutume, elle tombe un peu d'un côté parce qu'il manque ce qui porte la coutume. Oui. Mais quand le climat va changer d'un coup comme ça, là, ça va ressortir dans quoi? Dans la nature, dans l'herbe, dans l'air que tu respires, tout. Mais nous, on n'a pas vécu ça. Ça va changer, tout à fait. Mais est-ce qu'on pourra vivre dedans? Non, moi je dis ça, quoi. Ça va être difficile.
So in doing our video capsules, we've come to realize that climate change has had a huge impact on our customs and our cultures. I'd like to ask Mr. Fenton from 350.org, can you just briefly, from your experience, why do you think it's important to focus on people that are in the front lines of climate change?
Thank you so much. I think this is for me, the way I think about this is I'm going to try and give a values-based response, because I think it's one of the values that the Pacific Climate Warriors always centers in their work is one around respect for people's experiences. Everyone is an expert on their own experiences, and for doing our work, it's how do we reach people at a point where they're capable of believing us, right? So a lot of that means tapping into existing traditional structures on the ground, tapping into traditional knowledge, and then doing a lot of work to remind them that because they're the experts on their own experiences, the knowledge and the wisdom that comes from practicing and holding on to traditional culture and values is very important. And just very quickly, to tie that into how we use that as a strategy to communicate our work as well, I think a huge element in that is the way that the Pacific Climate Warriors do their work is they recognize that everyone is a born storyteller, but in order to infiltrate this very new digital world, trainings need to happen. And so a lot of the Pacific Climate Warriors, what they do is they go out into communities and they connect, they try and bridge the digital divide by providing a lot of the communities that they work with trainings in how to use something as simple as your mobile phone to ensure that, again, the stories that are told about your realities are shaped by your own voice and your own experiences. And bearing witness is so important, right? It's being able to capture your own stories and share that with the world using social media is a way in which we can really diversify the stories that are being told about a region.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Mr. Francois Martel to just build on that. How do you think that cultural knowledge can help Pacific Islanders to find solutions in dealing with the impacts, particularly with the work that you do at PIDF?
Thank you again. I think on the first day I did provide an explanation of what the Pacific Islands Development Forum was focusing on. One of the key particularity of the forum is that it is a multi-stakeholder organization, so it actually works with civil society and also with the private sector in engaging on sustainability. So having said that, I think it's important to realize that traditional knowledge, including cultural knowledge, is extremely important to define the basis for sustainable development. This particular video is from Burai in New Caledonia, and although New Caledonia is not one of I can reflect on the work, the 10 years of work that I've done in New Caledonia on establishing protected areas in the north, in helping setting up the first Kanak indigenous native local organizations for conservation, the first one in the country. And the entire concept of building from traditions came in effect in the establishment of this organization, who's now co-managing the largest national park in New Caledonia. Co-managing it with the government of Province Nord. So this is, but also in including all the elements of the traditional knowledge as part of the management process. And I think this is something that we tend to forget. If you look also at the architecture across the Pacific Islands, the traditional architecture is designed, has always been designed to build resilience against high tides. If you go to Kiribati, North Tarawa, you will see that all the valleys or the housing is actually built on stilts. And if you look at Samoa, you look at the architecture of the houses, they're like an inverted boat. They're designed to actually withstand and let through. They're all open. Houses in Samoa are open valleys to let through the wind. And if you look at the use of the material also is clearly something that's been adapted over centuries. And then suddenly we introduce iron sheets and all sorts of new material that's actually not traditionally designed and that does not actually do the same amount of work. So there's a lot of things we can retain from traditional knowledge, and this should be the first step in establishing any kind of activities related to sustainable development, is to look at, in the case of water, in the case of food security, Atolls have been resilient for years, for centuries, because they have actually planned the use of their food when they have extra crops to actually being able to withstand the time. So in times of hardship, they always being able to actually survive. Even in years where there was no transport, no helicopters, or no boats from Australia to come over and assist. So I think this is something that we need to keep in mind. And as part of our program, essentially, one of our key mandates is to keep that traditional knowledge as part of our entire development and use it not to innovate, but actually to build from that traditional knowledge. And also we call it innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Francois. I'd just like to add a word after that. I'm so agree with you. Yeah, it's so right. For the project we have, for example, if I have to compare it in Africa, for keeping the forest, the NGOs don't used to work with the indigenous people because it's quite complicated. But now we work in Central Africa, and for protecting the forest, the reality is that since 100,000 years, they keep that forest alive very well with all the wild animals inside without any problems. And now, when the industry arrives, when the NGO arrives, they don't have the reflex to use that knowledge for keeping that forest alive. So step by step, the things are changing, but it's not a reflex. So we have to insist on it. It's not for putting this knowledge in a museum, it's for using it, because it's quite useful. And step by step, if we don't keep it, if we don't use it, it will be lost, and it will be quite complicated to refine it later. Okay, sorry. Let me now go to the next one.
Je suis né le 2 octobre 1938. Je suis né ici à Huawei. J'ai grandi à la tribu. Voilà, ça a vraiment changé. Maintenant, là, on ne peut plus. On ne peut pas planter tout ce qu'on plantait dans le temps quand j'étais jeune. On va planter, mais ça ne pousse pas. Je ne sais pas, c'est trop sec. Hein? Avant, on savait quand c'était l'hiver et on savait quand c'était l'été. On sait quand c'est la saison de planter le café et puis de cueillir le café. La canne à sucre, il n'y en a plus. Ça ne pousse plus comme avant, ça pousse facilement comme ça. Là. Tout ce qu'on plante maintenant, c'est des plantes qu'on plante avec les engrais ou qui viennent de l'agriculture et tout ça. Là. Mais ce n'est plus les plantes du pays, quoi. Ce n'est plus ça. Parce qu'avant, on ne savait pas ce que c'est l'engrais. On plantait comme on voulait. Parce que la terre, elle était riche, elle était bonne. Je me rappelle de mon grand-père, ce dernier jour quand il allait mourir. Parce que lui, c'était le chef de la tribu. Dans ces derniers jours, il a invité toutes les tribus, il a fait le moral. Il recommandait aux gens de faire attention à la nature, de ne pas trop bousculer, de respecter la nature. Aujourd'hui, on fait n'importe quoi et c'est ça qui perturbe tout, quoi. Je ne pense pas à tous nos enfants qui vont venir derrière. Que je peux dire, mais bon, ben, la question que je pose, je dirais simplement que eux, comme c'est des gens qui font des études et tout ça, qu'est-ce qu'ils nous proposent? Qu'est-ce qu'ils proposent à la place du changement? Quand les choses ne changent pas, ou quand ça ne pousse pas, ou quand ça ne vient pas. Est-ce qu'ils peuvent nous donner une réponse?
Even though this EPOP capsule was done by our fellow EPOPers in New Caledonia, it's also similarly happening in other Pacific Island nations. I'd like to ask Ms. Sylvie from SPC, how is SPC boosting food security and providing concrete support to communities?
Thanks. I like the boosting food security. Just let me say that this assessment and the one just before actually confirms, the scientific evaluation that we carried out at SPC and in research centers. Indeed, fish stocks and crops on land are being stressed. This is, of course, climate change has an impact, but it's also, and this is confirmed, for example, for fisheries. It's due to decades of overfishing, habitat loss, and the rest. So if you take the example of fisheries, the stressed and fish stocks and the disappearance of some of the commercial stocks, at least the reduction of some of these stocks, is also due to a poor management of the stock. So the main recommendations, to come back to your question, what we do at SPC, we do encourage, in terms of food security of fish resources, we do encourage sustainable management of the coastal fisheries. We know that climate change will exacerbate the ongoing trends, in particular for coastal fisheries and for vertebrates and mollusks and that, shellfish and that type of thing. So, the whole recommendation and our whole work is to promote sustainable management of the fish stock. On land, and that video was pretty eloquent as well, we're looking at, the reasons are multiform. Climate change compounds all of this, and she mentions, the use of fertilizer. The soil the fertility of the soil has decreased tremendously in some areas. The practices, the agricultural practices have to be adjusted. So there is a whole spectrum of work that we do in our land resource division to look at a whole integrated approach to sustainable agriculture. One, helping to develop crops that are climate resilient or resilient to drought, or sometimes to flooding, and we have a genetic center called CPAC that is a repository of those types of crops that are resistant to climate change. We do work on pest and disease affecting the crops. So again, working at the moment, and my team would be upset if I don't say that, they're all focusing on the coconut rhinoceros beetles. Now, I didn't know about this beetle until a few weeks ago, but apparently this is the thing, yeah? That they're focusing on. So the introduction of new pests and disease to crops is extremely worrisome. So they're working on that, how to help out farmers and countries address disease and invasive species in crops. We're working on improving soil fertility, things like agroforestry, things like different farming practices. Of course, organic farming is being promoted. And we're working with networks across the region, like the Predcom and a lot of our partners as well, to promote organic farming. And it is happening, actually, in New Caledonia. It's coming up with pilot farms on organic farming, and it is showing very good results on the sustainability of the land. So we're doing a whole range of integrated approach to land, but also to ocean and water resources to increase the food security of those communities. But underlying that, this is not only an issue of climate change, it's an issue of managing the resources, and like this person has pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you. Just going back to that organic farming, Mr. Herman from SPREP, how does SPREP work with traditional leaders to go back to organic farming in order to maintain their environment for the future generations?
Thank you, yes. Well, SPREP is not that active in the area of organic agriculture and organic farming. I think there are other organizations that are more active in that area, including SPC, as Sylvie mentioned. But with regard to going back to traditional values, traditional knowledge within the area of climate change and food security and so forth, SPREP has some projects going and is active in that area. And maybe just to say that our vision is the Pacific environment, sustaining our livelihoods and natural heritage in harmony with our cultures. So right up front, we recognize that the cultural dimension is really important when dealing with environmental management issues in the Pacific. And when dealing with cultures, of course, traditional knowledge is a big part of that. We have a climate change division at SPREP, and they do quite a lot of work with the meteorological services in the countries. And the one area they're looking at is part of disaster risk reduction, I guess, is trying to improve the meteorological forecasts so as to warn communities, but also specific target groups like farmers of particular weather patterns that are likely to come about. These are early warning systems that they're strengthening. But there's one particular project which is called Climate and Ocean Support Program in the Pacific, or COSPAC, which is specifically focusing on traditional knowledge that is held by mostly elderly people about weather forecasting based on observations of plants and animals, or of weather patterns, or of even astrological or astronomical phenomena such as the stars and so forth. Just by way of an example, which I think may be of more interest, we're talking about plants. There's one example that was given, that was documented, of the breadfruit tree, that when the breadfruit tree has one breadfruit at the end of the branch or the node, that's how it normally appears in normal conditions. When you have 2 or 3 or 4 breadfruits fruiting together at the same time, that's taken as a symbol of a very active rainy season with high potential for cyclones. Trees, when they sense, I guess, that the weather is likely to change and cyclones are likely to come, they invest all their energy in fruiting and making as many seeds as possible, because the chance that they're going to be knocked over and die within the cyclone is high. So it makes sense that they invest in their reproduction during those times. Another example was of an animal. This came from 5 countries where people said the same thing, that when they observed turtles nesting on the beaches higher up on the beach, it was taken as a sign that, again, that there would be a very active and stormy wet season. But of course, this traditional knowledge, as we know, it's being lost at quite an alarming rate. So it is important to document what is known and to find ways to keep it alive and to transfer it to younger generations. Maybe just quickly a story from Tonga about how traditional knowledge is being lost. This was shared by the head of the Natural Disaster Management Office there when he visited some islands in the High Pai group after Cyclone Ian in 2014. He said recovery efforts were very slow and people had to wait for supplies to be sent from Tonga Tapu. He recalls going through the islands as one of the first responders and saw that there were so many trees, palm fronds, and natural resources that people could have used to make traditional shelters immediately after the cyclone, but nobody was making use of it because no one from those communities could remember how to build traditional Tongan houses. So this is just an example of how the loss of traditional knowledge is actually making our communities weaker, where they could be relying on this more in times of duress as a result of climate hazards and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman. This is the end of this event. We hope that now you know a bit more about EPOP. What is it? What it's for? I just want to precise that all the capsules, the video capsules, have been made 100% by the elves, not by us. The youngest is 15 years old, and the older, I don't know, maybe less than 30. EPOP is not a solution. It's just a part of it. I mean, it's a participatory project, and maybe all of us have got any, I don't know, I mean, any small solution, and 1 + 1 + 1 could give us a solution for the final. We've got many capsules. We've just watched a couple of it, but we've got many of it. But not only with sad story, it seems sometimes a bit sad, something. But we've got many capsules about good initiatives which have been made on the field and commented by scientists too. Now, I just want to say that EPOP programs are offered. It's open for the broadcaster. It's an open source project. It's not for putting in a museum, it's for broadcasting. This is what we do with France Media Monde around the world in 4 languages. And I just invite the broadcaster to use it. Please, it's not for us. We're not doing that for our own family. Thank you very much for all the panelists for being here. Thank you very much to the e-poppers. Thank you very much to the ABU for inviting us. Vinaka and merci in French for them. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you. And have you got this working? Thank you. It's a shame we weren't able to ask you any questions. You have a lot of broadcasters in the room, but hopefully we're having a break now. It's a coffee, 30 minutes, and that we have a session at the end that will look at the action plan and a way forward. So we'll combine those two and give you a little bit of a break after 3 days of talking and listening. So 30 minutes, and you'll be available here. So the broadcasters that would like to use some of the modules and some of the EPOP clips, you might find out where you can get them and how. Thank you. Thank you very much.